The best coaches in the game, we really ain't playing. We regroup up in the Slack chat where the coaches debrief. We be piecing these puzzles, occupy the chunk of the pie. Ain't no lie when we hit the block, helmets casket is top. You be seeing helmet after helmet, helmet after helmet. First place, second place, fifth place, eighth place, 12th place, 15, 16, 20. So many helmets, you got blurred vision, we got too many. Take your check. Oh man, shit. They got us fucked up. Army, regroup. We pledge always to have that edge. We don't fire warning shots. Competition just dropped. We locked and loaded before lock. Whatever the time, yeah. Do you even correlate?
Being the best requires a willingness to outwork your competition. There's always someone smarter, faster, sharper, more naturally gifted to come around.
Welcome, DFS Army. This is FantasyFling taking a first look at Yahoo DFS NFL Week 18 main slate. A lot of moving parts, just a lot of craziness just with playoff seeding. And then, of course, we got the Buffalo-Cincinnati uncertainty. Again, thoughts and prayers with Hamlin. Hope he makes a full recovery. But obviously, there's still a lot of moving parts. So we're going to take a look into it, navigate through it the best we can. And then, of course, my article will be out sometime tomorrow as we get just a little bit more clarity on everything that will be finished. So let's go ahead and dive into it and take a look. All right, so what we're going to start with is the game tiles, and you'll see over at the domination station, sharing my screen. Okay, that's sharing. Basically, there's a lot of low game totals right now. And so what we're really trying to focus on is teams that have a lot to play for as far as getting into the playoffs, seeding in the playoffs. For example, the Chargers, they're trying to get the 5th seed, for example, because that will afford them not having to play the Bills, the Chiefs, or the Bengals in their first game. So they really want that 5th seed. Now, it's kind of crazy because before they even play, if the Bengals win, they might be locked into that seed if the Bengals beat the Ravens. So, these are things that we're looking at. Can a team get the 2nd seed? Can they get the number 1 seed, a first round bye? So this is really what we're trying to target, these scenarios. These teams that still have a lot to play for, and hopefully aren't just gonna play their starters for a couple series and then rest them and then tank your DFS lineup. So that's the last thing we want specifically in cash games. So that in mind kind of leads me to the first game. We have Baltimore Tampa Bay versus Atlanta. So Tampa Bay, they really don't have anything to play for except that, they kind of want to keep momentum going. And Brady has always been this way back to his New England days. They've really always played in the final game. So, unless they have the number 1 seed locked away, even then they would still play some. So this is a scenario where even though they don't have a lot to play for, maybe in like a GPP, you would be playing Brady stacks. Obviously not going to do it in cash games, but this is a decent spot to play the Tampa Bay Bucks, just going off what their coach said. And really, it's just the Tampa Bay side would pretty much be all that I would be interested in this game. So New England and Buffalo. Now, Buffalo, they do have a lot to play for. Obviously, with what went on the other night, it created a ton of uncertainty on the number 1 seed. And if they can now get the number 1 seed, because had the game been played and they won that game, they would be in the driver's seat for the number 1 seed because they've already beat Kansas City. But with that game potentially being a no contest, we don't know what's going to happen. I do know that Buffalo, they need to win at least for the number 2 seed. So assuming this game gets played and does not get moved, to make room for the Cincinnati Buffalo game, obviously, this game is going to be needed to win for Buffalo. On the other side of that, New England, they need this game. So if New England wins this game, and they get a little bit of help, they can make the playoffs. So this is really a game that, assuming it gets played, this is a game where you certainly want to have some exposure to this game. For me, definitely on the Buffalo side. Don't really like Ramondre Stevenson with Damian Harris back, but some of their pass catchers continue to pop in the domination station and produce. Jacoby Myers and whatnot, Thornton, so on and so forth. And then obviously on the Buffalo side, if Buffalo does play this game, Josh Allen really is my favorite cash game quarterback. Now, Minnesota going against Chicago. Minnesota needs this game as well, really for the number 2 seed. And it's not the number 1 seed, but they still want to play for that number 2 seed. So, they get the easiest matchup. They get that home game, and really assuming, the first team, the number 1 seed, gets disappointed, they could potentially have the home field advantage throughout the playoffs if that happens. So, number 2 seed is something that they definitely would want to go after. They're going against Chicago and a Nathan Peterman team. Nathan Peterman is starting because Justin Fields has been ruled out for this game because he's injured. So Nathan Peterman, we know him when he was, I believe it was in Buffalo. He had that 5 interception game. This is a perfect bounce back spot for Minnesota. And if they're trying to get that number 2 seed, it bodes quite well. So Cousins, Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, Hawkinson, these guys are certainly in play. Chicago side, no thanks. Baltimore and Cincinnati. So Cincinnati they both have quite a bit to play for here. Ravens can get the number 5 seed with win and a Chargers loss. And Cincinnati, they can get as high as the number 2 seed, depending on, how all the things shake out with that game getting rescheduled, potentially, and whatnot. So the Bengals certainly have a bit to play for in this game. I expect them to come out and play accordingly. Burrow, Chase, those are 2 guys that, I'm definitely considering playing this week. Obviously, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, these are some guys that are more of a tournament play. But in cash, I do think specifically I like Chase this week. Houston and Indy, this game is ugly. Outside of GPP, don't really like anything in this game at all. New York Jets going against Miami. So Miami does need to win this game to have any shot at making the playoffs. However, Miami is now down to Skylar Thompson. No Tua, most likely. No Teddy Bridgewater. He got hurt. So it's going to be Skylar Thompson and then just running back by committee. So it's really hard to like anybody on the Miami side, specifically just because New York Jets have a good defense. On the New York Jets side, I have a little bit of interest in Garrett Wilson. But other than that, I wouldn't play him in cash games, but I have some tournament interest in Garrett Wilson. Much easier matchup this week going against Miami. Now, Carolina and New Orleans, not a lot there. Honestly, nothing I really like. Low team total, low game total. Just really nothing to play for there with these teams. So Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. So on the Pittsburgh side, I do like Najee Harris this week. Pittsburgh, there's a scenario where they make the playoffs. They need to win, and they need both New England and Miami to lose, which pretty good chance that happens, actually. Both those teams are favored to lose. Miami, they are a 1-point underdog to the Jets, and then obviously New England going against Buffalo, they're 8-point underdogs. So that could potentially happen for sure. And, Pittsburgh, if they win, obviously they have a great shot here. So going against Cleveland, one of the worst run defenses in the league, top 3, top 5. Najee Harris, I think he's in a good spot. Pittsburgh being favored. Positive game script. You certainly like that. So Najee is in play for me. I'm in cash games. Obviously, Pickens, Deontay Johnson, a little bit of tournament interest there, but certainly wouldn't go there in cash games. Now, New York Giants and Philly. New York Giants, they cannot improve their playoff positioning at all. So this is a game they're likely to sit starters. Saquon Barkley, there's really no reason for him to play this game. Daniel Jones, if he plays, I certainly don't expect him to be running all over and taking unnecessary shots. Philly, on the other hand, they are playing for the number 1 seed. So Jalen Hurts was limited in practice. I believe he practiced today, was limited. He is expected back. So this is a game where they need to win, and they should win. And, certainly like Hurts and his pass catchers because of that. However, if we don't think the Giants are going to be competitive, there is always that risk that Philly is going to come out and just throttle them in the first half. And then, it's not going to be enough for their salaries to produce a tournament winning upside. Or, there's even a little bit of risk factor with like Jalen Hurts being $40 on Yahoo that, they're going to come in, they're going to be winning the game handily, but, he's only going to score like 15 points or whatever. And, then he's going to get benched in the second half because the game's already out of hand. So that's a little bit of a concern for me. So, I would be more so off on Hurts and tournaments for sure. And I think Miles Sanders actually is a good play. And I like Devonta Smith as well. But obviously they're always in play in tournaments and cash games. More of an avoid for me for the really expensive guys, Jalen Hurts and the AJ Brown. But Devonta Smith and Miles Sanders, I think, are in prime spots in that game. Obviously, on the New York side, there's really nobody that's playable, just given that, they could rest their starters entirely. So Dallas going against Washington. Dallas is actually still live for the number 1 and number 2 seeds. So, maybe a little bit of CeeDee Lamb. Washington does have a really good run D. Washington, I believe, is starting Sam Howell this week. No Heineke, no Carson Wentz. So who knows what to expect from Washington. On the Dallas side, I do think CeeDee Lamb is playable. Other than that, I don't really like a whole lot. Now, the Chargers and Denver. This is an interesting game because I liked it a little bit more when we thought the Chargers needed to win to lock in the 5 seed. Now, with the Baltimore and Cincinnati game being at 1:00, and, if Baltimore loses that game, Chargers are locked into the 5 seed. This is a very risky game to play in your cash games. For me, it's a good late swap option in case, for example, Baltimore wins that game. Now the Chargers need to win the game. Now they need Austin Eckler. They need Keenan Allen. They need all their playmakers. Then maybe you might consider late swapping to like an Eckler or an Allen or Mike Williams, guys like that. But other than that, I would probably avoid this game outside of like GPPs. On the Denver side, they are getting their offense going. There's some salary saver plays for sure on the Denver side, but other than that, there's really not a whole lot to like in this game. Denver obviously wants to keep a little bit of momentum going into the offseason. Their offense looked better last week. They fired their coach, so they want to show a new potential head coach that they still have some things to work with here in Denver, and that Russell Wilson isn't washed. Now Arizona and San Fran. So San Fran has quite a bit to play for. So they need a win and an Eagles loss for the number 1 seed. And, they're going against an Arizona team that's very depleted. So love Christian McCaffrey in this game. I think Brock Purdy and like George Kittle could be a good contrarian stack in tournaments off of like Christian McCaffrey leverage. Or chalk could be leverage off of Christian McCaffrey. But other than that, I love Christian McCaffrey in cash. He has been battling a little bit of an ankle injury, but it hasn't really seemed to matter with him because he's gotten like 23 carries the past several weeks when he's been dealing with this. So lots to play for, like San Fran. Then the last game, Seattle going against the Rams. Now, Seattle, they won't know their fate. As long as they win, they won't know whether they've made the playoffs until after Detroit plays. So it's very important for Seattle to win this game to lock up that last playoff spot. They're home. They're favored going against Baker Mayfield. There's a couple plays for me in this game. I like Cam Akers going against Seattle's horrible run defense. Cam Akers has looked really good the past few weeks, kind of like the guy we remember before he had the injury. And, he's cheap. He's pretty cheap. and he's going against Seattle's horrible run defense. So he's in play on the Rams side. On Seattle side, I like DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett only played, small percentage of the snaps last week. And obviously the Rams, they have Jalen Ramsey, but DK he's priced appropriately and he's beat that matchup before. So just going to get into some of the plays that I like this week. Now, we don't have all the functionality right now on the domination station because of just so many moving parts, the ownership projections. It's very hard to have those be accurate as they normally are right now. So those, once we get that dialed in, we'll get the leverage plays for you. I'll finish up my article. But this is kind of where I'm looking at in cash so far. So kind of as I mentioned, we're going to focus on game environments where the teams have a lot to play for in regards to playoff spot or playoff seeding. And that could provide an easier matchup in the first round and a potential first round bye for those playing for the number 1 seed. So assuming Hurts returns to the lineup, I do think the Eagles, they're obviously in a must-win spot to clinch the number 1 seed, and I believe Hurts is playable, assuming he's not going to have limitations. So with so much uncertainty on this slate, again, this is one of the better spots just because of what they have to play for and the talent on that team. But my only concern is the Giants are just going to be non-competitive, and they're going to shut it down quickly after the game gets out of hand. So that said, Josh Allen, if the Bills end up playing this game as scheduled, he would be my top cash game play. They need to win to clinch that number 2 seed, and they can get as high as the number 1 seed pending the decision on the Bills-Bengals in the Week 18 results. So if the Bills and Patriots game goes on as scheduled, Allen is just the best cash game play for me based on his floor and what's at stake. Now, Kirk Cousins and the Vikings, it was a disaster last week. They hit rock bottom. But, there's a lot of craziness on this slate, and Cousins, he's just a decent cash play based on a salary. The matchup against Chicago, just a very depleted Chicago team with really nothing to offer offensively at this point, and with what's on the line. So Minnesota can get the number 2 seed with a win and a 49ers loss to Minnesota. And Coach Kevin O'Connell did say, he hinted that they would be more in line to play their starters this week. So, I guess we got to take that for what it's worth. And, the Vegas totals, we don't really need to count twice, right? So the Vegas totals are going to, no one's sharper than Vegas. They're going to factor that in. Minnesota has a 25.5 point team total, which is really the 3rd highest on the slate. And they get Chicago team starting Nathan Peterman. So really don't need to overthink it. So Christian McCaffrey playing for the number 1 seed. And they could lose the number 2 seed with a loss. So they do have a lot to play for. And it's not that they're locked into the number 2 seed. Furthermore, Arizona is giving up 4.39 points above average to the running back position, despite dealing with a minor ankle injury. As I said, Christian McCaffrey, he continues to see a good amount of workload. So if he plays, he's playable in all formats. Dalvin Cook. Chicago, they are best attacked on the ground. If there's a weak point in the defense, it's more so on the ground, as we kind of saw last week. Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift running wild. They give up almost 3.5 points above average to the running back position. So I do think there's a legit scenario where Minnesota just tries to win this one on the ground through Cook. We've seen Cousins, throw like 5 interceptions in the past 3 games. I think maybe there's a scenario where they just want to establish the run a little bit more. So he's phased out of the game last week, but, it was a horrible game script. Obviously, they were down early and they were down big. And, Cousins kept throwing interceptions, and they were just looking for the big plays. So Vikings, 8-point favorites, and really I could see them winning this by double digits. So this should be a very positive game script this week for Cook. Miles Sanders, this for me, when I look at this, and this is why I'm just kind of scared to play Hurts in cash this week, this game environment just screams Miles Sanders. The Giants, they cannot improve their playoff positioning, so they're likely to rest their starters. And the Eagles, they are playing for a lot. They're playing for the number 1 seed. they also have Hurts, who has a sprained shoulder. He had a sprained shoulder joint. So why subject him to any unnecessary hits in a game that you don't even need to do a lot to win? And they're 14-point favorites. So I can totally see Miles Sanders just getting a heavy load here and, potentially having one of his ceiling games. Cam Akers, 22 touches over the last 2 games, and he averaged over 5.5 yards per carry in doing so. So he faces a Seattle team that is terrible against the run, 6.7 points above average to the running back position. That's what their defense gives up. So Cam Akers, another good play. Najee Harris, again, Pittsburgh needs to win to have any shot in the playoffs. Najee gets a bottom 5 run defense. He's averaged 23 touches the last 3 weeks. And really, he should see the same amount of volume here in a juicy matchup and must-win game. Fournette. So Mike Evans got all the touchdowns last week. So obviously, Fournette wasn't going to have a great box score. But he continues to get a lot of work, and this is a salary saver at $12. So Domination Station, DFSArmy.com. Use code FantasyFling for a 10% off a VIP subscription. This will get you access to top fantasy points per dollar plays, our projections, the ceiling projections, ownership projections, all the things. Definitely use that promo code if you want to be a VIP, because I know a lot of you watch the podcast and you're not necessarily VIP. So try it out. You could do a month free, in fact. And I will link that in my article. Follow me at Twitter at FantasyFling, because I tweet that out as soon as I do, and you can get that link for trying it for a month free, because we're just getting into basketball. We've got basketball, NHL, golf, all the things. Even though NFL season is ending, DFS never ends at DFS Army. It is year-round. And by the way, if you like this kind of content, please hit the like button, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that notification button so that you never miss an episode when we go live. Now, the wide receivers, Justin Jefferson really is in the prime bounce back spot. It's a stud coming off a dud narrative. Number 2 seed on the line. So I don't think you need to play Justin Jefferson in cash this week, but this is an awesome bounce back spot. And if you don't play him in cash, you need to have heavy exposure to him in tournaments, I think. Just given the context of the slate, not being a lot of elite options, and him having a lot to play for. So he actually needs 194 yards to set the single season record. I don't expect him to hit that, but I do expect him to get over 100 yards. And he already went for 154 yards against Chicago. So if they are determined to get him that record, I can definitely see him hitting it. But definitely, I think you struggle to find a scenario where he doesn't get over 100 yards this time. So Jamar Chase, as I mentioned, I like him. The Bengals could get the number 2 seed with a win and a Bills loss. They play at the same time as the Bills. So they're not going to know their fate until after they play. So the number 2 seed is certainly a lot to play for. They'll look to win this game. And Chase gets a Baltimore secondary that is bottom 10 in the league against wide receivers. I mentioned Devonta Smith. I like him. He's been getting about 10 targets per game. And, there's slight risk, again, that they shut it down early. Because of that, I would prefer $24 Devonta Smith versus $31 A.J. Brown. Chris Godwin. Mention him. The Bucs, again, they have nothing to play for, really, as far as seeding goes. But the coach suggested that they need to continue to build some momentum, because I could see that. It's been bad most of the year, outside of one game. If they want to string together a couple games, great. Godwin continues to see 8 to 10 targets, and he's had consistent production. So in his salary, $23, based on the amount of targets he gets, that's really good. Same with, Devonta Smith, and as well as DK Metcalf. Must-win game for Seattle for the final playoff spot. He's beat Ramsey before. He had 8 targets for 127 yards and a touchdown week 13. So not going to be scared off the matchup, specifically with Tyler Lockett being out. I just think it's a good price and a must-win game for them. I like it. Even if Lockett does play, we can expect to see – he didn't practice today. So if we can expect to see a limited amount of snaps, kind of as we did last week. Now, Sutton, for me, salary saver. He came to life a bit last week. He had actually a play called back on an egregious offensive pass interference call. It was just horrible. It would have been, I think, 40, 50-yard reception. So certainly would add it to his total, got him in the double digits. He's only $12. So no idea if they can continue to build on what they had versus KC last week. But here's the thing. It's not necessarily what I think, because the domination station has Sutton listed as top fantasy points per dollar play. And I just don't fight with Diesels. So rounded out here, tight ends, George Kittle. As I mentioned, I think it could be kind of a sneaky stack this week. Brock Purdy to George Kittle, cheap, sneaky stack that could potentially smash going against Arizona. Mark Andrews, just based on his price, if Lamar Jackson plays, I like Mark Andrews at $19 in a game where they need to win to get the 5 seed. The reason why you want the 5 seed in the AFC is because that means you're not playing the Bills, you're not playing the Chiefs, and you're not playing the Bengals. You're playing basically the Titans or the Jaguars with that number 5 seed. So coaches know this. Like in your first game, obviously you would much rather play the Titans or the Jag versus the Bengals, the Bills, or the Chiefs. So if Lamar plays, I like that. Tyler Higbee, I like Higbee just because Seattle is so bad against defenses. So he could certainly be a decent play. Now we're going to go over to the domination station and, look at some of the top fantasy points per dollar plays at defense and tight end. This is normally for my cash game, specifically my cash game lineups. This is, how I'm going to pick my defense and tight end. Just because it's such a high variance position, you normally just want a pay down option. Hunter Henry, Jelani Woods is going to be your complete punts. There's nothing really stands out as a great matchup this week for a tight end. So if you can find the salary to pay up a little bit, great. Otherwise, it's fantasy points per dollar plays. Yeah. Taysom Hill, Jelani Woods, Hunter Henry, take your pick. As far as defenses, we continue to see it last week. Saints were in the nuts, and they were going against the Eagles. So defense is the most craziest position to predict from week to week. You got a defense in a bad matchup that score 18 points like the Saints did last week. It's just crazy. So you could see it here. For example, the New York Giants versus the Eagles. Don't love it, but if you get another Gardner Minshew, he threw a pick 6 last week to Lattimore. So this is actually how the Saints ended up in the nuts. So not a horrible spot. For example, if you get Minshew over Hurts, Atlanta Falcons versus Tampa, Pittsburgh Steelers. This is my favorite option. Deshaun Watson hasn't been very good, obviously, to start the year. Better last week, but the stat line was kind of misleading. Some of those were very short throws that were catch and runs. So Deshaun Watson definitely hasn't been he's been rusty. He's not been what they thought they were getting when they traded for him. So the Steelers in a must-win game against Cleveland. Yeah, I think that's probably going to be my favorite option on the slate. But you can see fantasy points per dollar. There's a lot of options that come up. The Dolphins versus the Jets, the Bengals versus the Ravens. So a lot of cheap options. I definitely in tournaments would probably get exposure to a lot of these teams. And then last, Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson. So as of right now, as I said, my article isn't finished. It will be out tomorrow. We have a little more clarity. But as of right now, where I am looking is Kirk Cousins to Justin Jefferson. Stud coming off a dud, great bounce back game. The pricing is right. When we get the ownership totals, that'll really help dial it in more. But I'm just looking for teams that certainly have something to play for, have a pretty high game total, And, you get players like Justin Jefferson, who has a lot of incentives, to break the single season record. Needs 194 yards, things like that. And then specifically with Chicago starting Nathan Peterman over Justin Fields, we've seen Peterman play before. It can be very bad. So as of right now, until we get a little more clarity on Buffalo, on Philly, if Jalen Hurts is going to play and whatnot, definitely Kirk Cousins to Justin Jefferson would be my Yahoo Baller stack of the week. But stay tuned, as we got a lot of content coming your way. 2-game slate on Saturday. Obviously, tournament tactics, Players Club this weekend, of course. And then we got the 13-game slate this weekend. So I think that's going to do it. Again, follow me on Twitter at FantasyFling. I will tweet out my article as soon as it is done tomorrow. And good luck this week. It's the last main slate of the year. Hope you all bink it. Out.